So, Michelle.
So, David.
Oh, my God.
I know.
When's it all going to end?
I know. We had a week off, and then all of a sudden there was so much going on.
Yeah. Look, and, I want to get into, I really want to get into this. There is a lot going on. There's all sorts of things going on all over the world, but we know what everyone wants to talk about right now.
It has something to do with the Middle East.
It's got something to do with the Levant. I don't know. And the one thing I do want to specify right now is I do not want to get into the political weeds over this one.
We are not picking sides.
Do not ask me to pick a side.
No.
I'm not picking a side. I'm merely reporting the intelligence as it has appeared before me, and I am applying my analysis to it.
Well, let's do it then.
All right.
You're listening to I Spy, the intelligence failure of Australian intelligence.
Well, I had it on very good authority that you were going to be here last week, and you weren't here last week. And all of my sources said you were going to be here, and I assumed you were going to be here. So I've been sitting in this room for a week, and I smell bad.
Is that what that is?
It's me.
I did send a WhatsApp. Oh, it's encrypted.
Oh, no, I got it. But I chose to ignore that because that's not how you were meant to behave.
Okay, Egypt. Hello and welcome to I Spy. My name is Michelle Stevenson. I'm here with David Callan. And look, a few things have been going on since we've kind of had a couple of weeks off.
We had an impromptu break.
We did. We had an impromptu break. Now, Israel, we have to talk about Israel, Gaza. But particularly, we want to focus on the security side of things and
how it happened
and how it did not get picked up, because this is some interesting stuff. We're not going to weigh into anything political because it's just a minefield,
if
so to
we
speak.
do drift into that area,
I'm going to reel you in.
Reel me in.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, I think the best quote I've seen from this is there are no heroes in this situation.
No.
Right? And that's how I'm focusing on this one. But what's really important in this is if we do get into political weeds and you have an objection or you want to pull me up or you want to agree or anything like that, at I Spied Podcast on the artist formerly known as Twitter, also known as X.
Which is, I'm just calling it binfire now because it's an absolute binfire.
Dumpster.
Yeah. Right.
So just come on to Dumpster, find us there at I Spied Podcast. So what happened?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is one of those things that Israel is, they have their fingers in a lot of pies. Their spies are everywhere and they know everything.
Now, here's the interesting point that's been made, and it comes down, it all actually really comes down to the missile strike on the Gaza hospital, right? So there was that Palestinians, Hamas, immediately turned around and said it was an Israeli airstrike. And of course, Israel turned around and went, no, it was a failed launch of a Palestinian missile. And
we should say it doesn't help things that there is a lot of misinformation out there.
Yes.
And a lot of it is coming from Hamas, but a lot of it's being amplified by Russian bots.
Yeah, and also, but there's misinformation coming from both sides.
Absolutely, but also it's more prevalent from Hamas because that is how, as we know, that a lot of these groups like to win wars, and that's through misinformation.
Yeah, through the misinformation war. Now, the interesting thing is evidence and intelligence suggests that it was likely a misfired missile. The interesting point that was made by somebody
we don't know yet, but the PIP, I think it is, the Palestinian.
Oh, it's definitely it'd be Hamas missile. If it was a misfire, it's a Hamas missile. One of the interesting points is, and I've seen this sort of stuff on my deep trolls on Reddit. There's interesting footage, like there's footage of a building in Gaza, and then out of nowhere, a missile. Well, a bomb really just strikes the building and it's gone.
Well,
and it flattens itself. Now, the thing is, the accuracy is amazing, right? This is a JDAM. This is a weapon designed to follow a laser to its site, right? Now, the interesting thing is,
but it didn't really hit a building though.
No. This isn't that strike.
Okay,
it's not the hospital strike.
Okay.
This is just a random strike in Gaza.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is, as someone said, the Israelis didn't do it because they wouldn't have missed. Now, here's the thing. Yes, they would. The problem we've got at the moment with a lot of people is people see Israel as being infallible in their military and intelligence. And the thing is, what's happened in the last 2 weeks proves uncategorically that they are not infallible.
Yeah, so let's get down to basics. Let's start at the very beginning because the how this all happened and what we've found now that there's all these secret tunnels under Gaza. There's rockets. There's arms. They're heavily armed. They'd been planning a lot of this first strike for 2 years. I think it was
about 2 years. Yeah, it would take that long, and Israel missed it.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly enough, just to break down how you can have an intelligence failure, because the thing about intelligence gathering...
And I should say, sorry to interrupt, this is similar. We're going to break this down in a similar way that we look at September 11.
Yeah, exactly. Perfectly way. Which is, again, another intelligence failure.
Yes.
Right? Intelligence failures happen because, one, information is not available. You either underestimate or overestimate your enemy's intentions. There's a lack of communication between your own intelligence agencies. One of the most important things to remember, and I think this may be the problem that we have here with this situation, is what's known as received opinion or conventional wisdom, aka wishful thinking. This is how we see the situation. Nothing you tell us is going to change that. Now, what's very interesting about this is the Egyptians have said, we warned you about this. They said, we don't know what's going to happen, but we know something big is brewing. Now, the tunnels that lead into Gaza come out in Egypt. That's how they get in and out. Now, Egypt would obviously monitor that. They'd know if material and people are coming in and out. So the Egyptians turning around and saying, we believe this is going to happen. What happened was the Israelis immediately turned around and said, well, that's not what our intelligence is telling us, so forget it. Don't worry about it.
So it's kind of like a Putin-esque situation.
Kind of. I mean, the interesting thing about when you say a Putin-esque situation is, let's be perfectly honest, our guy Joe, Sleepy Joe Biden, did turn around when the Russian troops were gathering and went, yeah, guys, this is going to go down. And everyone went, no, it's saber rattling. Here we are nearly 2 years later and it's still going on. The 3-day military exercise has expanded.
No, I just mean like Putin doesn't like to listen to anything that counteracts his
totally.
opinion.
That's totally true.
Yeah.
Now, there's that sort of thing. The other thing that can get in the way is poor tradecraft. That is also very evident in the fact that there was this – the tunnel system under Gaza is well known. What they didn't realise was basically Hamas knew the capability of the Israeli intelligence services and went, well, how do we counteract that? We go back to basic tradecraft. One, we have a closed communication system. So there was no digital communication, no mobile phones, no computers.
They used landlines.
Landlines, built a landline system. Basically, they built a PBX under their city, and that's how they communicated between cells. Second thing they did, face-to-face meetings, right? So that's it. Finally, and the most important thing, and they've discovered this with prisoners they've picked up, is basically the prisoners have said that, look, we've been training for months, but no one told us what was going on. So essentially what they've done is they compartmentalized everything like crazy, kept the plans very, very, very tight to their chest, and then waited for the one moment they knew that Israelis would be going, yeah, not a problem now. It's literally a long weekend. Now, interestingly enough, 50 years ago, something very similar happened called the Yom Kippur War.
Right.
So conventional wisdom back in 1973, right, was that Egypt will not invade Israel ever again. They won't attack us, right? And they said, and the other conventional wisdom was, without Egypt, Syria won't move either. Now, at this point, Jordan had actually gone, we don't want any part of this. They got their ass kicked in the 1967 war and basically went, yeah, we're out. We don't want to play with this anymore. The thinking behind this reasoning was, we have an air force, Israel has an air force that is dominant. It will destroy anything that comes near us, so no one's going to attack us. The king of Jordan actually flew into Israel, into Tel Aviv, into what's called the Mossad House, a little guest house that Mossad have, met with the then Prime Minister Golda Meir and went, something's going on. We think Egypt and Syria are going to attack. And Golda Meir went, I'm sorry, but that's not what our intelligence says. And then suddenly they were attacked and they had to scramble to save their asses.
You think you would take any information from other countries as maybe something you might want to look into?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's like they were going. Their reasoning was Egypt are not going to attack us. One, because we've got a better air force, and two, they're not going to attack us because they know they can't wipe us off the map. That was not Egypt's intention. Egypt didn't want to wipe Israel off the map. Egypt just wanted to get the Sinai back. Actually, they didn't want the whole Sinai desert back because in the 67 war they lost it to Israel. They just wanted the other side of the Suez Canal so it became theirs again. Right? The Suez was controlled by Egypt, and then Israel basically took the Sinai right up to the Suez Canal, and I think it was closed for a couple of years. Right? So this was the thing. So jump back to now. Again, Benjamin Netanyahu was told by the Egyptians, and there is human coming out of Egypt that this is actually what happened.
Yeah.
The Egyptians went, mate, something's going on. You better keep an eye on Hamas. They're going to do something. To which Netanyahu turned around and went, not worried about Hamas in Gaza because we know that all the trouble is coming from the occupied territories, and we're focused solely on that. We're focused on Jerusalem. We're focused on the West Bank. We're not worried about Gaza because Gaza is broken. Well, Gaza was not broken. Gaza broke out and kicked their ass very briefly and very badly. It was an appalling.
It was horrific.
Right? So this is the problem we have. Poor tradecraft. It's very obvious that the human that the Israelis have, that they think they might have, is absolutely flawed because this took place right under their nose and they weren't talking to the right people in Hamas. They obviously don't have anyone in there.
Well, it's also interesting too because a lot of the leaders of Hamas live in Qatar and they're not even anywhere kind of near what's going on. So how this all kind of happened and how they kept it secret for 2 years would have the Israelis definitely looking closely at their intelligence.
Oh, they will be having a huge review. Both the IDF and the intelligence community in Israel have said, we dropped the ball on this. We know we've got it wrong. Even Netanyahu came out. He made a speech today that was not a good speech to make.
Netanyahu. Let's be clear too. Netanyahu is not that great.
Well, can we actually, while we're talking about Bibi, let's talk about Bibi because there's a couple of things that we really need to understand about what's going on personally with him.
Yeah.
One, he's got the political issue of these protests that have been going on about his judicial reforms. He's got a legal issue, a personal legal issue with allegations of corruption.
Well, and I do have to say there's a lot of people there's always people who come up with these conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
So there's conspiracy theories that he allowed this to happen because it'll justify him having a war, which will allow him to stay in power and say, look, you needed me.
Yep.
Anyway, continue. Yep.
Now, the other thing, and this is a really big thing that it's not a common fact, but it is kind of common. It's well known. But just if you didn't know this, Netanyahu served in the special forces in IDF. He actually served, he was under fire. He was in action in Lebanon. His brother then took his position in that squad. He was literally the commander of the same troops that he were. They were the guys that went to Entebbe to rescue the hostages that had been taken by the PLF-PEO. So the Palestinian Liberation Front Executive Office or something, they basically hijacked an Air France plane, flew it to Uganda, and the Israelis went in to get them. The leader of that group was one Yonatan Netanyahu, Bibi's little brother. Yeah. Right? The operation was originally called Operation Thunderbolt. It was then changed to Operation Yonatan because Yonatan was the only Israeli casualty. He died. Right. He was killed. His body was dragged back onto the plane. And there is that, that thought that Netanyahu was never going to forgive Palestine for taking his brother from him. Right. So there's that. Now, another thing you need to understand about him is he's the leader of Likud, which is the dominant party of the coalition that is governing Israel. Just another idea. In the last 4 years, they've had 5 elections in Israel. That's how unstable it is politically. That's crazy. And it is pushing further right. Because even though Likud and the coalition is very right-wing, Likud is the most moderate party in that right wing.
Which is interesting.
Now, here's an interesting point. You ever heard of a guy called Itamar Ben-Gvir?
No.
Ben-Gvir, I like to call him Itty just because I don't know him. Ben-Gvir is the Minister of National Security in Netanyahu's cabinet. Right. Okay. Now, here's the thing. Ben-Gvir, the Minister of National Security, mind you, so this is a pretty big wheel in this situation, is not allowed on the War Council.
Okay, why?
Right, because here he is. He's an Israeli settler from the occupied territories. He's a member of the far-right Otzma Yehud. And here's the great thing, supporter of Kach.
Okay.
Right. Now, Kach is a religious Zionist extremist organization that has been labeled as a terrorist organization by Israel, right? He's vehemently anti-Arab. He basically believes that if you're not a Jewish citizen of Israel, get out, right? Okay. You've got 3 options. You leave, we kick you out and compensate you for any losses, or we just kick you out, right? He was rejected by the IDF. Now, if you're an Israeli citizen, you must serve. You're conscripted into the IDF. The IDF rejected him as being too extreme.
Well, I mean, that says a lot.
Yeah, it says a lot, okay? Now, he's currently demanding that the Knesset force Bibi to expand the War Council to put him on it. You know you're not the kind of guy that they want around if they're not your job is national security and they're not putting you on a War Council.
Yeah.
Right. So
there's a lot of internal machinations that are really not very cohesive.
Look, it's not. Look, as much as we say that, Hamas is bad, and Hamas is bad, it is essentially a terrorist organization.
It is a terrorist organization.
Is dedicated to annihilating Israel. They want to wipe Israel off the map, which is why they're a perfect fit for Iran, because Iran have also said, we want to wipe Israel off the map. But this is the problem, all right? It's two wrongs trying to make a right, and it's not going to work. No one's going to compromise. No one's going to give any field. And now we've got two US carrier groups sitting off the Levant. Now, interestingly enough, I don't know if you read about this, an Arleigh Burke class destroyer, so a US destroyer. And these things are absolute terrors of the ocean, right? These are, anti-missile warships.
Yeah.
So the Arleigh Burke was off Yemen. Yemen launched some drones and some cruise missiles that might have been heading towards Israel.
Yeah.
The Arleigh Burke took them all down. It was like something like nine projectiles in the air.
Yeah.
Now, so a lot of...
There was 4 missiles and 15 drones.
Right. So a lot of popular thinking was that was the Arleigh Burke in the US turning around and saying to everyone else in the Middle East, guys, step back.
Yeah, so basically it's been confirmed that Saudi Arabia intercepted a missile barrage heading towards Israel from Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen, with the US Navy's USS Carney also intercepting 4 missiles and 15 drones. So
That's right,
probably
the
more.
Carney.
Probably more missiles. Yeah.
But the interesting thing about that Carney, that launch from the USS Carney, was it wasn't just a message to the Middle East going, settle down, let us sort this out. It was also a big message to Israel going, don't get any ideas, boys.
Yeah.
Because we are sitting right off your coastline and we will take anything that
anything that gets lobbed in either direction.
Any major object. Like you've got the Iron Dome over Israel that is protecting them from most of
I always think of when I think of Iron Dome, I think of Stark from the Marvel universe. Do you know what I mean? It's it sounds very Marvel universe to me.
I think the Simpsons movie myself. But anyway, all right, that big glass dome that they put over Springville. This literally is a problem 2,000 years in the making. And what's interesting about it is all of these, it has the hallmarks of so many other intelligence failures that have happened, right? There's a really interesting one, I put it out there as an example of how intelligence can be badly used, right? So the 1983 bombing of the Marine barracks in Beirut, right? Terrible, killed a whole heap of people. And basically they drove I think it was Hezbollah, I'm not sure, or Al-Fatah, one of the Lebanese-based terrorist groups, drove a truck full of explosives into the barracks itself and detonated it and killed 200 Marines. Now, the thing about that is this was a litany of failures of intelligence. One, the FBI had been given a memo that Lebanese terrorist groups were creating explosives using acetylene bottles. So what they were doing, they were putting acetylene bottles together and then wrapping those acetylene bottles in other acetylene bottles that had been wrapped in explosives. So basically what you've done is you've reinforced the explosive. It makes it doubly dangerous. So they had a memo saying these guys are building these things, so you may want to check out anyone buying acetylene in Lebanon. They never bothered to pass it on to the Department of Defense. So the Department of Defense, who were on the ground in Lebanon, weren't looking for this. The other thing was they had a lot of information about what was going on outside of Beirut because they were getting satellite footage of these guys practicing driving trucks through obstacles, right? And they were going, gee, that's an interesting thing. I wonder what they're doing that for, right? No one bothered to make the connection that looks like our compound or, the security zone leading up into our compound. And the basic thing was post the incident, the commander of the Marines in Beirut turned around to his intelligence arm and went, you can tell me what's going on in the Bekaa Valley in full detail. You can't tell me what's going on outside our gate.
Yep.
And this was the thing. The problem with this moment was US military intelligence was going, we've got to keep an eye on Bekaa Valley because that's where they are, not bothering to go, what are they doing in the Bekaa Valley and how does it relate to where we are? And this is this idea of underestimating and overestimating your enemy, but also having that received opinion, that conventional wisdom that says this is what's going to happen, this is what we do, therefore this is what our enemy
So then
will do.
how could this have gone better? Like, how do you think Israel, because regardless of whether Egypt had warned them, surely there would have been other signs.
Yeah, well, there was one really, really big sign, all right? Now, what happened was there was a lot of activity the day before the actual breakout. There was a lot of activity around the wall, right? And there were IDF troops on the other side of the wall looking at it going on, and they were like going, there's a lot of activity going over there. Should we do something about this? Now, the important moment was a commanding officer basically went, we've had no threat assessment to tell us anything's going on. The conventional wisdom is currently saying that these guys are pacified and aren't going to do anything. Ignore it. Right. So it was another one of those ones where somewhere in the chain of the command, no one had bothered to go, are we actually piecing all of this together? And this is one of the things that happens in intelligence, particularly.
It's like pieces of information on their own look innocuous, but when you start putting them together, it starts to clear a picture. One
of the things is the fact that intelligence often becomes captive of policy, right? So our policy is we want this to happen. This is what our policy is in this regard. And intelligence goes, actually, you can't do that because of the following bits of information we got. No, ignore that. Find the stuff that supports our intelligence. So weapons of mass destruction in Iraq is regarded as a massive intelligence failure, mainly because the intelligence they were getting was wrong.
No,
it wasn't wrong. It was misapplied.
A lot of people question if it even existed, but yes.
Well, the thing is, if you have an argument, I mean, Thank you, Internet. If I have an opinion, I can find 5 people on the Internet
who
that will agree with me,
you.
right? Now, that's the problem with intelligence now is we've got too many people that are going, this is the result we want, find the evidence to back it, as opposed to this is the evidence we've found, what does this tell us? And this is what happened with weapons of mass destruction. Now, I think still, I remember watching Colin Powell sit in the National Security, the Security Council stating the case, and just the look on his face was like, this is bullshit and I know it.
Yeah.
Right? But the conventional wisdom at the time was he's obviously doing it. Now, turns out that he'd actually been liaising with North Korea for guided missiles, and this is Saddam Hussein, and he'd also been liaising with the Doctor of Death, this atomic physicist from
I'm sure there was
Pakistan.
Yeah, I'm
but
sure
the thing is, there's no evidence he had
There
it.
was threads. There was threads that didn't really lead to anything concrete.
But policy turned around to intelligence and went, we need you to find this, right?
Yeah, of course.
That's one of the big problems is to turn around and go, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen, so make sure we've got evidence to back it.
But surely you would think that Israel would have spies in Gaza.
You'd think. But if Hamas have gone, we know how these guys operate, we know what they're doing, they're going to be breaking into an organisation like Hamas is like breaking into Fort Knox. These guys play their cards very close. They do not trust. How long did it take to find Osama bin Laden?
Yeah.
And it took polio vaccines to find him, which is then, of course, as we've discussed
Now
in an
it's
earlier one,
screwed everything up
one's
then.
got everyone's catching polio in the
Yes, because no one trusts the people who give you the vaccine.
Yeah, the border countries of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Right. So the whole thing is basically Hamas would have looked at anyone new and gone, yeah, love you to join us. Go over to that cell over there and work with them for a while. And that's just the blind, right? That's where we can see if you really are going to be a member of Hamas or you are a human intelligence asset for somebody else. So that's one thing. Al-Qaeda, these guys are really good at doing this because they know how these big organizations work. They know how the national organizations work. So the other thing is the tendency to predict the enemy's actions on what you would do. It's mirror image. They call it mirror imaging, where you go, well, we wouldn't do that, so why would they? Well, they're going to do that because you're not.
Well, okay, so now let's bring this from a security perspective back home to Australia and what ASIO would be keeping an eye out and all of, our security services keeping an eye out for, because now we've got issues with Palestinians here.
Yep.
We've got a lot of anti-Semitism.
Yep.
What would be going on from an Australian perspective?
It's going to be busy up in Canberra right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the Bin Chifley building right now, yes, Palestinians are going to be watched. Not all of them, right? The great thing is take it as an example, and the rhetoric that came out after the Palestinian demonstration that wound up at the Opera House with while they're lighting the Opera House with the Israeli flag or the Israeli colours, and down on the steps are Palestinian protesters chanting "Gas the Jews."
Well, okay, so
Dumb.
when we say protesters, it was one or two. This wasn't like
Oh no, it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
And we've got to be clear because a lot of people kind of what was said was abhorrent, and these people should 100% face whatever it is that will be handed to them. But there were a lot of peaceful protesters, and there were a lot of Palestinians who actually told them to go away and tried to shut them up.
Now, but here's the thing, right? Personally, from the footage that I saw of those guys chanting what they were chanting, I'm just like going, you're a bunch of dickheads.
Well, yeah, they're just
a bunch of young dickheads full of piss and vinegar.
Bogan Aussies.
Bogans, right?
Yeah.
Who think, this will be funny. Ha ha, let's do it. No, you've just made yourself look like a bunch of prats, and you've put your own claws back.
It's the same as the Nazis that we have here. What would they be keeping an eye out for now? Because it does feel like there's a little tension in the air, and a lot of this stuff is heating up.
They're going to be looking at people that are planning on doing any kind of incident. The fact that you've got families in the eastern suburbs, the Jewish families in the eastern suburbs, who are basically turning around saying, we're not sending our kids to school in school uniform, right?
Yeah, and the Jewish schools do have a lot of security, but the federal government has had to give some money out for a lot of other schools to ramp up their security needs.
Now, what they're going to be looking at, they're going to be looking at any right-wing anti-Semite movements and
who would jump on board on
who would jump on board.
Yeah.
They're going to be looking at any Palestinian groups that may think that they can get away with doing something like creating an incident. They're also probably going to, and then look, this would have to happen. There will be extreme Zionist people in the country, and they're going to be watching them too.
Yes.
They're basically going to watch anyone who's going to have an extreme reaction to this. The problem being, right, as we said before, there are no heroes in this. There really aren't. There's if you want to go, we could go down the rabbit hole of what it's like to live in the West Bank or in the occupied territories as a Palestinian as opposed to an Israeli, and it's awful.
Look, what happened to the Israelis, particularly the young ones and a lot of the old ones and the babies and stuff, it is abhorrent. These are incredible atrocities that are disgusting and should never have happened. But then, I watched a video today of the bureau chief for Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
He was reporting, and Israeli shell hit his family's safe house, and he lost his
daughter,
wife, son, daughter, and grandchild.
Yeah.
So I also could not. And he's there doing the work and making sure that everyone knows what's going on. So yes, there's a lot of misinformation.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's politicized, but also there are a lot of facts, and I don't think either side wins in it.
Yeah, and look, ultimately, there's the conspiracy theory that came out that Netanyahu knew this was going to happen and let it happen because
it's just disgraceful. I mean,
that doesn't help.
They did the same thing with September 11th.
Yeah.
They said, the government makes money off selling arms, which yes, there are companies that do, and yes, it's wrong.
Yeah.
But I highly doubt any leader would allow these things to happen.
I mean, there is the old thing that I think was it Roosevelt? I can't remember who was. I think it was Roosevelt. They knew that Pearl Harbor was going to happen. They let it happen.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about doing that, all right? If it ever gets out, you're worse than screwed.
But also, do you think those secrets would be so tightly kept that no one would ever find out?
Well, that's the great thing. I mean, the greatest secret that was ever to be kept from the American people was the deal that Russia and America did over the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that was out in 3 years later. We knew. It's like when everyone says that the moonshot is fake, I'm sorry, the number of people it would take to fake the moonshot, I think it would be out by now that it was, we know it was fake, right? The evidence you use is, the flag's not waving. It's in a 0G a 16G environment with no atmosphere. It's not going to wave.
And also, we do need to touch on, and probably not right now, but also while this is going on, we still have Putin and Ukraine. So, but also apparently Putin's had a heart attack. So,
there's that as well.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, I was just reading before I walked into the studio. I was reading this little article that's come out in TASS, which is the Russian news agency, basically saying, America are now sending 12,000 troops. Well, they actually have sent, I think it's about 4,000 Marines spread across those two carrier groups. And the whole thing was, it's basically go, oh, hang on, if you take everybody that's working on those carrier groups, it adds up to about 12,000 people. It's not 12,000 troops, but they're trying to make out like the US is going to go on the ground offensive.
No, they're just
Israel.
they're just there trying to keep the peace.
The worst thing that's going to happen now is the ground offensive that's going to go into northern Gaza. Like, as a point, if anyone's wondering, Gaza, what's the big deal about Gaza? Gaza is about half the size of Canberra.
Yeah.
And has
had like
4 million or 2 million?
Yeah, it was 2 million.
2 million people.
2 million. And I think something like 70% were children.
Yeah, right. This is not going to end well for anyone.
No.
And for anyone who thinks, Bibi did it on purpose, it's not going to end well for him. He's already said he's got to accept responsibility for the intelligence failure, he does. And also, hey, you can be the greatest wartime leader in the world, but once that war's over, as Winston Churchill will tell you, so's your goddamn career. You've done your job. We're not happy. We need to move on, bugger off. And I think this could be a bit of a death knell for Bibi. I mean, he is the most, his political machinations are extraordinary.
He's not a great man.
There's an interesting video that I found, and I will post it if I can. I think I've saved it, but it's a video of him in someone's lounge room. He's talking in Hebrew, but it's translated. He's basically talking about how he gained the Oslo Accords. One of the big things with the Oslo Accords was, West Bank becomes Palestinian, Gaza becomes Palestinian, anybody living in between, right? But anything that is a military installation is exempt. Now, Bibi was only working in the Knesset at the time. I think it was, I can't remember, it wasn't Ariel Sharon. Was it Sharon? I can't remember which president it was, but Bibi was involved in it. And Bibi basically turned around to the H.W. Bush and went, we need you to tell us that we have last say on what's a military installation or not. Right. So Bush went, yeah, here's a letter. And he went, have you given that to Hamas and to the Palestinians? And he went, no, why do they need to know? It's like, well, we won't sign the accords until the Palestinians know that we are the ones that determine what a military installation is. Oh, okay. As soon as the letter went, they signed the accords. And then Bibi went round and went, okay, sorry, the entire Jordan Valley is now a military installation. And every time a settler wants to move into a house, they just go, this is now a military installation, you need to leave. And then the settler moves in. So it's like he's gaming what is meant to be a peace deal.
Gaming the system.
But this is the thing with Bibi. He is an incredible politician, right? Say what you want, venal, evil, whatever. This guy has an agenda and he is working to it. Now, the agenda I do not think would extend to the fact that are we going to let, 1,400 Israelis die, including all of these kids enjoying a music festival?
Terrible.
No, he's not going to stretch to that. But is he going to take advantage of it? Hell
yes.
Yeah. Right. And this is a real issue, is he's not pulling punches now. The latest speech that he made as of the recording of this, he basically turned around and said, we are the light, they are the dark, and we will enact the prophecy of Isaiah, which is basically
declaring war.
This is all-out war.
And religious war. This is the problem, is this is all-out religious war and there is no winners here.
No.
And it's not going to get better and it's going to go on for a while.
And look, I live in a Jewish neighborhood in Sydney. I have a lot of friends that are Jewish, and what's really interesting is some of them have been very much like, well, why haven't you come out and supported Israel? And my answer is because I don't support either side. And you know what? I am staying completely neutral in this one. I will call it as I see it. And if you are offended by that, I'm sorry, but that's just the way I'm leaning at the moment. I can't find good in any side of this argument.
Well, as a journalist, I have to stay as neutral as possible, and while just reporting on what comes to light and when it comes to light.
And which comes back to this thing about the intelligence failure.
Yeah.
As an intelligence officer, you have to remain neutral. You can't get passionately involved in the information you're dealing with. And I think the problem we have, and I think Australia used to have the problem, I think we've grown out of it. I think we've curated our intelligence organisations now that they are pretty apolitical. I think the problem that Israel have at the moment is they aren't. They are working to policy as opposed to shaping policy around the intelligence they're getting. It's just the way it is. It's sad.
Yeah. Not as sad as talking Israel and Palestine.
Yeah, this has been a hard episode. I can't wait to get back to something light like Putin's heart attack. That's going to be fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And also the Danish guy that's been hit, the Danish foreign minister who's been tailed by his own intelligence. Look, there is so much going on at the moment.
I just need more people falling out of windows,
yeah,
please.
well, hey, that could happen at any time.
Yep.
Looking for a new career? Welcome to Do HVAC Training Service Center in North Charleston. Enroll today in our comprehensive HVAC training hands-on field experience-based program, covering troubleshooting, maintenance, installation, and more on various HVAC systems and ductwork. We offer EPA and NAEP preparation and testing, along with various certifications. Enjoy payment options. Achieve certification in under 5 months. Enroll now for your new journey of skill development and career advancement. Log on to dewhvactrainingsc.com to inquire.